The Revolutionary East and the Next Tasks of the Communist International by Pak Chin-sun. The First and Second Internationals were associations that actually included the masses only of Europe and America. They paid very little attention to the Eastern question and, in general, to the question of the colonial peoples. The majority of the official leaders of the Second International strove to keep the colonial question in the background and to fence off the Western European workers' movement from the revolutionary struggle of the enslaved colonial nationalities. They were afraid to address this question openly and clearly. Whenever they took up the Eastern question, the official leaders of the Second International trembled just as much as did the bourgeois politicos, with their constant sham devotion to democracy, civilization, and culture. The complex questions of the revolutionary struggles of the enslaved colonial peoples who make up the majority of struggling humanity were quite alien to the ideologues of parliamentarism. Even at the founding of the Communist International, Asia was weakly represented, which necessarily had an effect on the work in the East. But consciousness of the necessity of a common revolutionary struggle by the working masses of the East and West grew ever stronger. The great, victorious October Revolution in Russia was the first bridge between the proletarian West and the revolutionary East, and Soviet Russia became a connecting link between two hitherto separate worlds. The necessity of a common proletarian struggle in the East and West was never as sharply felt as at the present time, when the ruling classes have transformed flourishing fields into barren desert and laid peaceful towns and villages to ruin, when the working class has decided to raise the banner of an implacable revolutionary struggle for the power of the toiling masses, for a new, free life for all humanity. Today, the specter of social revolution haunts the whole world. The bourgeoisie is straining every nerve to briefly delay the hour of its downfall. The Second World Congress of the Communist International should thus direct serious attention to the East, where the fate of the world revolution may be decided, for whoever understands the need to go to the enslaved nations of the East and win them as allies will emerge as victor in this last war between labor and capital. The acute economic crisis in Asia, which is inevitable at the moment of the transition from feudalism to capitalism, and the imperialist great powers' barbaric policy in the colonies have created favorable conditions for revolution there. This policy has aroused strong nationalist tendencies in the East. Granted, the first stage of the revolution in the East will be the victory of the liberal bourgeoisie and the nationalist intellectuals. Nevertheless, we must begin now to prepare our forces for the second stage by drawing from the depths of the peasant masses, enslaved by the feudal regime, organized forces to carry out an agrarian socialist revolution in Asia as soon as possible. The industrial proletariat in Asia, excluding Japan, is too weak for us to entertain any serious hopes of an early communist revolution. But the victory of the agrarian revolution is certain if we are able to master the immediate tasks of the great and bloody struggle. Russia's proletariat, standing at the outpost of the world social revolution, was able to withstand the desperate 3-year onslaught of the world bourgeoisie only because it knew how to win the poorer and middle peasantry to its side. The vanguard of the European and American proletariat, uniting around the Communist International, must fight hand in hand with the many-millioned masses of the revolutionary East if it desires a speedy and successful victory over the capitalist class. The impossibility of such a victory without the collaboration of the colonial peoples is so evident that further proof is superfluous. The history of the inglorious downfall of the Second International showed clearly that, so long as the world bourgeoisie has a reserve of strength in the colonies in general and in Asia in particular, it will be able to repulse the most desperate attacks of the insurgent proletariat. By directing the awakening East on the right path of revolution, the Communist International will destroy the very roots of opportunism and irresolution in the proletariat of the Western countries. Action, however, must be coordinated in such a way that the European proletariat delivers a blow to capitalism's head just at the moment when the revolutionary East is dealing it a mortal wound in the heart. The victorious rising of the colonial peoples will sign the death warrant of any Bernsteinism and petty bourgeois trade unionism. The prompt execution of this task will accelerate the triumph of the Communist International on a world scale. The question now is, what forces are propelling the revolution in the East? The majority of the former nobility, the liberal bourgeoisie, and the petty bourgeois intelligentsia, which represent the intellectual forces of the revolution in Asia, have learned from the long years of struggle against foreign subjugation and from a process of agonizing mental struggle. They have understood that the rebirth of the East is not possible except through the rule of the broad toiling masses. The bankruptcy of the Second International promoted the rapid development of revolutionary ideas in the East and deprived these forces of any hope that their people could enjoy a free existence without the triumph of the social revolution in Europe, Asia, and elsewhere. Two opposite roads lie open to Asia's nationalists. The one leading to personal prosperity, based on the perpetual suffering and gradual degeneration of the great masses of the people. The other leading to the social revolution, which will deprive them of material privileges to a certain degree, but will bring liberation to their people. To our great joy, the majority of the idealistic nationalists took the side of the revolution. Certainly, even in the revolutionary milieu, there are also elements that unite with us, internationalists, only to attain national political liberation. But we shall use their revolutionary zeal for the struggle against world capitalism and for the triumph of the social revolution in the whole world. But should the revolution one day require it, we will know how to turn our arms against our allies of yesterday. Victory will undoubtedly be ours because the masses of the East, just liberated from foreign political and economic slavery, will hardly resign themselves to the violence of new masters. Such a policy of supporting the nationalist movements in the colonies is impossible for those so-called socialist governments that are afraid of outraged patriotic feelings in the unenlightened toiling masses of the countries whose ruling classes are carrying on a barbaric colonial policy. But the Communist International has no reason to fear such outrage, because the vanguard of the international revolutionary proletariat, whose ranks are growing every hour, will judge its actions at their worth and give its far-seeing tactics complete approval. Thus, although we are struggling together with the nationalist elements, we cannot look upon them as our comrades, with whom we may go on to the end without fear. Without the slightest hesitation, we must make clear to the working masses of the East that national political liberation alone will not give them what they are fighting for, and that only social liberation will guarantee them complete freedom. The victory of the first stage of the revolution in Asia will coincide with that of the socialist revolution in the West. Proletarian Europe, groaning under the yoke of bourgeois democracy, cannot remain impassive before the sufferings of the broad toiling masses of the East. The European proletariat, imbued with a sense of international solidarity, will come to their aid. Of course, we can predict with certainty that a dreadful howl will be raised in the bourgeois camp, but our Western comrades, we can be certain, will meet with a hearty and fraternal reception from the proletariat and working peasantry of Asia. The East always opposed only that form of foreign intervention that brought with it chains and slavery. But the intervention of the socialist proletariat of the West will be a great and even needed help to the toiling masses of Asia in their struggle against every kind of exploitation. The proletariat of the East yearns for such intervention. The Second Congress, which must give the revolutionary proletariat a plan of action for a successful struggle against world imperialism, will most certainly not forget the great role of the revolutionary East in the international workers' movement. And the toiling masses of the East, with the help of their European and American comrades, after having vanquished the foreign and native oppressors, will transform Asia, the land of religious achievements, into a communist oasis of revolutionary achievements.